Welcome to 5 points of articulation and to a DC Multiverse Knightfall Batman head swap showcase. First, a quick reminder that figures like Hush and 3 Jokers have incompatible neck joints and cannot be swapped, and just so I don't keep repeating myself, any one of these head swaps will require repainting. Going in basic order of release, and here we have DC Essentials. The DC Essentials heads are some of my favorites, so it's hard to say whether or not this is an upgrade, but it fits really well. Additionally, while the shade of blue on the McFarlane is a little bit darker, it actually matches well enough in regular light that you might not have to do a repaint on this one. Either way, it's a very solid combination and has my endorsement. Other way around, in full disclosure, I don't actually have it pegged into place, it's just kind of sitting up there. Additionally, one of the ears on mine broke, so it's a little bit smaller, but I love the way this head looks on this body, and it might just be the best of both worlds. Since this is a blue and gray version of Batman, I figured we'd go with a blue and gray version of Detective Comics 1000. As expected, this head is an immediate upgrade. I feel like this head with this body and a cloth cape would be pretty impressive, and I can't help but feel that this shade of gray would have been so much better on Knightfall Batman. The ironic thing is, as much as I don't like this head, I don't mind it as much here. On this body, it kind of gives me a Batman the Animated Series vibe. Doing this head swap and then repainting this to be black and gray could be something kind of cool. Next up is the Grim Knight. If you ever wondered what Benedict Cumberbatch would look like as Batman, specifically Benedict Cumberbatch without a frontal lobe, then this is the head swap for you. Other way around, and this looks great. The head sits at a great height and scales well, and elevates what was already a pretty cool figure. Here we have one of my favorites, Arkham Knight. What makes this combination interesting is how realistic the facial details are, combined with all the wrinkles sculpted into the fabric, and it does look like it could be just a dude wearing a spandex costume. In that regard, if you want a comic book Batman come to life, this would be a very fascinating custom. Other way around, and honestly, I don't like this combination quite as much. As much as I love this head, I think it's a little bit too small and a little bit too simple for this body. Zooming on out and you get a much greater appreciation for what I'm talking about regarding the proportions. One of the best Batman heads is from Dark Knight's Death Metal. As much as I like this head, I have mixed feelings about this swap. For one thing, short ears with this style of Batman just feels wrong to me. On the other hand, I really like the silhouette that the width of this head cuts. Flipping this rock album over to side B, and I like this one a lot. Having the longer, intimidating ears just makes more sense for a rock star version of Batman, although in McFarlane's defense, the short ears are what the comic looked like, and that's what they based it on. Next up, and here we have the Snyder Cut Batfleck. In what I'm sure comes as a surprise to absolutely no one, this really doesn't look all that good. The goggles head and the comic style body just is a real mismatch, although I am very curious to see how the movie six-pack head is gonna look. Other way around, and I'm not even really all that sure about this one. The neck curves inward in a way that makes the head look very awkward. If, however, you can overcome that, this does have the potential to be a pretty interesting comic-style armored or tactical Batman. Normally, Rebirth isn't good for head swaps because of how small he is, but I've got a good feeling about this one. And yeah, this scales great. I would go so far as to say that with all the head swaps I've done, this has never looked so good on a different body. As I said with Detective Comics 1000 Batman, if you were to turn this into a black and gray version, I think it would really look cool. Conversely, this is pretty cool too. Obviously, the longer ears aren't comic accurate for Rebirth, but this head still fits really well, so if you wanted to do something with this, you absolutely could. If you've seen enough of my Batman head swaps, you know that Future's End is always a treat. That trend continues here. The Knightfall head fits really well on the Future's End body, and although the costume is made for Tim Fox, would make a pretty fun Bruce variant. Other way around, and as always, this is pretty cool too. I don't necessarily see this as a main display Batman, but it could make for a pretty cool helmet if you were to display him on a Batcycle. Similar to Rebirth, I'm holding out a lot of hope for Page Punchers because it is on the short side. And as luck would have it, my hope has been rewarded. The head scales very well and is a nice long-eared closed mouth option for this figure. In fact, if you want to make a blue and gray version of Page Punchers, this probably would be the best head to go with it. This way isn't bad, but I don't know if I like it quite as much. Don't get me wrong, the head scales fine, but there's a lot of extra details on the mask that don't really match the aesthetic of the rest of this figure. But if you're determined to make this combination work, I'm sure that a good solid paint job would balance everything out. Speaking of shorter figures, Injustice 2 might just be the smallest one McFarlane's made. I know it's how it looked in the game, but my least favorite part of this design is the chin strap, so this is a real improvement. Having the fully exposed jaw just balances the head out so much better, and size-wise, the Knightfall head fits really well on this body. As for the Injustice 2 head, the size is fine, but it really doesn't match up. Similar to other swaps we looked at, there's just too much detail on the mask to go with the costume. And again, again, that chin strap makes it look like he's only got half a face. For another live action comparison, and here we have Pattinson. This head is comically too big for this body. Not only that, but aesthetically it just does not go together at all. That said, if you were to match this head to the body, I feel like you would get a kinda sorta Adam West. The other way around isn't too bad though. Even though it's based on a comic, the jaw is somewhat realistic looking, so it could pass for a person. And like I always say, pretty much any head is better on this body than the one that came with it. Since we'd have to do a repaint anyway, I figured I'd bring out the red-eyed Earth-2. If you saw my video on this figure, you know I was a bit thrown off by the proportions. I will say, even here, this head on this body seems a little bit on the small side, especially once you pull out to see that short torso and those very long arms. I am, however, very pleasantly surprised by the inverse. My apologies for the damage to the ear on this figure. Unfortunately, my puppy got a hold of it, which is one of the reasons why I very seldom show off this one. Either way, if you wanted to make a Knightfall Batman from the comic with the even longer ears, this would be a pretty good way to go. For one that I know a lot of you guys love, and here we have Arkham City. Once again, if you want a super long-eared version of Knightfall, this would be a pretty good way to go. There also isn't so much detail in the mask that it couldn't pass for being part of this costume. The face does feel a little bit long for this body, but with a repainted head, I think it would all balance out. Other way around, and I do think this one is a bit too small. Painting it up and it might look better, and of course you could always mix and match some other limbs to see how you like those proportions. For the one that I think I might be the most curious about, and here's Michael Keaton from The Flash. Now that I see the combination though, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. Maybe if he had a longer peg to give him slightly more of a neck, it would balance out better. In terms of the thickness between the head and the neck though, this was actually a lot closer to the movie than the actual figure is. Other way around, and similar to Arkham Knight, this could pass as a real person in a cloth costume. You'd still need to file down those dreadfully rounded off ears, but if you ever wonder what Michael Keaton might look like in the actual comic book costume, this would be the way to go. And then for a blue and gray Batman I don't bring out nearly often enough, here we have Speeding Bullets. To make this one work, you're gonna have to keep the pegs that come with each body. Otherwise, this head will sit too short and the other head will sit too high. I don't know why I'd want to do it, but I gotta admit it does look a lot cooler than I was expecting. Admittedly, I was more curious about how it would look this way around. As much as I like the Knightfall figure, I much prefer the color scheme and proportions to this body, and I really wish that McFarlane would resculpt this buck to use as a standard Batman and a standard Superman. Speeding Bullets Batman is actually Superman, which is a perfect segue to a couple of Superman figures. This one's Red Sun, and the reason to look at Superman heads is for possible unmasked Bruce Waynes. I like Red Sun for Bruce Wayne because of the neutral expression, the archy eyebrows, and the lack of Superman spit curl, but I have to admit I think this one might be just a hair too big for this body. Next up, and here we have the Liebermejo style page punchers. This one kind of has the curl, but it's not quite as noticeable, and overall the rest of the hair is kind of on the messy side, so for me it's distinct enough from Superman that I think this could be a solid Bruce. Otherwise the scaling is perfect, so this one definitely could be a contender. And lastly, here we have Superman from Future's End. This is my favorite head to use for Bruce Wayne, and once again it more than lives up to my expectations. The only downside is you're stuck with a very angry looking Bruce instead of a neutral one, and also the gray temples, but if you're okay with the grimace and willing to do some repainting on the hair, this is a very solid option. Before I go, Merc with a Mouth Productions asked to see this Batman side by side with Mafex Spidey and the movie Blue Beetle. If you're watching, I hope this helps. And lastly, Quizmaster 8 asked for a swap of Year 2 and Knightfall Batman's arms. As you can see, these arms are way too big and look kinda hilarious, but they are a much better shade of gray than the one used on this figure. Other way around, and this is pretty hilarious looking too. Look Ma, I'm a T-Rex! Which combination was your favorite, and is there any that you tried that I didn't? Sound off in the comments below. If you like this video, check out one of these. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.